One of these guys, who we've known forever now, has a wife who is the most fantastic liar I have ever encountered. Guy deployed for a year. Wife moves in a different dude because they are just friends and she's just helping him out while he looks for an apartment. Guy comes back from deployment. Other dude miraculously found his own place just weeks before that. A month later, wife announces she's pregnant. Sometime later, baby is born 12 weeks premature, but somehow weighs 7 pounds and is totally healthy. To this day, my husband's friend believes he's the kid's father and his son is some kind of medical miracle. A student still maintains the lie that his younger brother was stabbed to death in the bedroom next to him and that he found the body the next day. He has told this story to many staff and students. He is, and always has been, an only child. That my friend likes parsnips. Every weekend he'd come for Sunday dinner after ice hockey. My dad was under the impression he loved parsnips because he had them once and used to make him extra every week. Rather than tell him, I'm not a fan of the food you've made me for years, he continued to eat them despite literally hating them. One day, he took them from the fridge and hid them just so my dad would think we didn't have any in. My dad went and bought some so he didn't miss out. This lie lasted for about 6 years. Cheated on an end of year test at school. My friend took the test before me. Told me a few questions so I looked it up online and wrote the whole answer scheme on a slip of paper and took it into the exam. The school realized I'd got an abnormally high mark and had got word for word perfect answers. I kept up my lie and had to lie to school officials. Had big heated debates. Got my parents involved. They said they were going to make me resit a test of the same caliber. Because my parents had had a big battle with the school and were annoyed that they doubted me, I had to get good marks on my retest. So, I found the last 10 years of mark schemes from that type of test online and wrote them down on bits of paper. At the start, I handed in my phone to the deputy head, who was invigilating, and glanced at the year of the paper. I then asked if I could go to the toilet before the exam started. Before she put the test on my desk, I took all the years of mark schemes out from my pants, because the teacher wouldn't be able to ask why I had a bulge in my underwear. Aced the test again. Deliberately word for word to really rub it in that I'd outdone them. I once took a book report from the internet and handed it in. Teacher continues to tell me that this exact report was written by a former student of hers and published online. I just told her it must be a coincidence we wrote the same report. Word for word. A good friend of ours has always had a crush on another guy we know well. Unfortunately, early on in their friendship while talking about their families, second guy revealed that his father had passed away when he was young, true, and first guy, in that nervous attempt to relate to and impress a crush that I'm sure many people understand, blurted out that his father had also passed away. False. He felt horrible about it from the second he said it, but can't figure out a way to explain himself without looking like a total piece of shit, and has simply accepted the reality that he can't ever pursue a relationship with this guy. A couple years ago he slipped up and mentioned something about his dad to the second guy, who questioned it. So he now pretends his actual dad is his stepdad. In a job interview at a major corporation there was a 3-person panel and after an hour or so someone asked if I had any hobbies. I said I like to play golf. What's your handicap? He said. To which I responded, I don't have a handicap. He then enthusiastically said, oh, so you're a scratch golfer? And of course I said yes. I'm not a ducking scratch golfer. I don't have a handicap because I'm not good enough to bother keeping score. But this went on for about 10 minutes. Why don't you play for a living? You can making decent money being a scratch golfer. So I had to give a whole spiel about how my education was more important bullshit. In the end I didn't get the job, which is probably a good thing because it would have sucked at that first company golf tournament. Edit, scratch golfer, a player who can play to a course handicap of 0 on any and all rated golf courses. My ex-best friend continues to get pregnant even though she takes birth control. Newsflash, she doesn't take birth control. 6 kids. 6 dads. Tons of child support. 20 years after my dad chose Drew Gus over his family, he's still denying it ever happened. It wasn't me. He denies that he was on Drew Gus. He was really good about not being high around us. And he never seemed like a tweaker. Basically a closet meth user. The 6 years in prison for attempt to manufacture didn't help his story. My daughter carved her initials into our coffee table with a thumbtack. She claims to this day it must have been a cat scratching at it. I apparently spent a day writing my brother's name on the walls of the house. And then said he did it. I was 3. He was a year and a half. He totally did it. Totally. I don't like when my wife cooks spicy food. The first time she did it we had just started dating and I didn't want to offend her. But the food she was feeding me looked, smelled and tasted disgusting. I didn't want to offend her. So I said that I don't eat spicy food. We have been together for 5 years now and married for 2. And to this day I have to tell her that I don't eat spicy food. Even when she is not around I can't eat it around my friends in case they mention it in front of her. I once mentioned that maybe I'll try to build a tolerance to it and she started making it again and I just can't eat it. Way too much spice. Not even too hot. Just too much spice. I get away with eating flaming hot Cheetos because I tell her it's not real spice. I know more than one person has probably heard this. But I knew someone who used a fake pregnancy, his wife not him, to get out of work. He then used it a few more times claiming she had doctor's appointments. He then was forced to lose the baby to a miscarriage after a few supervisors chipped in and surprised him with baby supplies. He then mourned the loss of his child at work for a while. He had to act sad for what probably felt like forever. So this one time when I was young, I think 6, I lied to my mom and told her I brushed my teeth. I had been elaborate with this lie. I wet my toothbrush. I unscrewed the lid on my toothpaste. I let the water run for a little bit. Despite all my efforts, my mom figured out that I hadn't actually brushed my teeth and asked me about it. I told her it wasn't actually a lie. It was a social experiment. To see if I could fool her. The woman made me write down my results in a scientific format and by my own personal composition notebook. As a punishment. My senior year of high school. I had my first boyfriend. He went to my high school, but had graduated and was a sophomore at a nearby college. He came home weekends and breaks. So we spent time together when he did. As it turned out, he had never actually broken up with another girl from our high school who he'd been dating for 2 years. She'd moved to a different state and they kept dating long distance. He went as far as to fake a fight on the phone and broke up with her in front of his parents. So they didn't know he was cheating. I found out and called him out in front of his family and I don't think his mom has forgiven him yet. That was 8 years ago. He never broke up with the girl. She never believed anyone who warned her. He continued to cheat all through college. She finally graduated from her college and they got married last summer. The friend of my mom quit his job, but didn't tell my mother. To hold the lie upright, he left the house at 7:30 am and went back at 5:30 pm. He spent most of his time in his car, browse news on the mobile phone or read books. This went on for 4 months before an acquaintance told our family that my mother's friend doesn't work anymore. I still can't believe that he spent most of his time in a car, waiting for a better day. There was a lad at school who tried to convince everyone he was born in Spain. He even said he had a Spanish name that had been Angloized. So Marcos Carlos Smith had changed to Mark Charles Smith. Another student who lived on the same street asked his mum where he was born and she said in the UK. The guy then claimed that he was born in Spain and immediately traveled to a hospital in the UK where he was registered. Just stop. It's over. Heard about this person through a relative. A pathological liar over every little thing. To the point where he lied about having cancer in really obvious ways, description of treatment, timeline, etc. It was even worse that his RA actually had a parent going through treatment and had to listen to his blatant bullshit. People continued to point out that none of what he was saying made sense and that he was hurting people actually affected by cancer. But he continued to double down with more bizarre and nonsensical lies. My friend was once dating a British guy and she liked to playfully mock his accent. So one day she's going for a tattoo appointment to get a whole sleeve done and she's on the phone with her Brit. She's mocking him when she walks in and quickly says bye and hangs up when her tattoo artist overheard her and asked her if she was from England. For some reason she said yes and had to speak with a British accent for her entire session and talk about her life living in London. Her tattoo came out amazing and that artist is now her go-to guy, so every time she goes for another tattoo she keeps up the charade of her being British. A friend once stole another friend's recreational substances during a night in with a bunch of people. She continues to insist it wasn't her despite everything pointing to her being the culprit, and most damningly, someone who wasn't there who is friends with her suddenly having the same recreational drugs in the same stylized case they were in a day later and admitting she had sold it to them. Personally, I don't do drugs and found the whole situation ridiculous. But stealing from friends is pretty low. Continuing to lie about it for years to the point no one trusts you or even wants to talk to you anymore and not even feeling a bit guilty is something else. Not me, but my sister. She suspected her husband, father of her 2 young children, of cheating. He was always on his phone, but super secretive about what was on the screen. He had lots of time away from the family for work. She questioned him and he just said he was depressed, and gave her things to work on to fix him. Like she should make healthier meals for the kids and clean the house more. She also worked full time. He was a world class as. She sets up a tracking app on his phone. Finds he was lying about where he was and confronts him. He blames her for being suspicious. The real clincher was she started having odd symptoms. Goes to DR and tests positive for an STD. Keep in mind she had given birth 3 months before. She confronts him about this and he tells her she must have given it to herself by not washing her hands and using the toilet in a public place. Continued to stick to this story for years. He left my sister for the woman he cheated with shortly after the STD debacle. My sister is seeing a much better man now. Long story short. Go to my then GF to sleepover. Which was planned. Got a weird feeling when I get to the door. I tip to the left to peek inside. She's half naked with a fully naked guy. I knock and wait even though I have the key. She comes to the door dressed. Invites me in. Introduces the guy as a friend. He leaves. I ask her what's up. She says just friend. I tell her I saw him naked on her bed. She denies cheating and say he told not a single woman can resist him when they see him naked, and when she saw his big dick she didn't do anything else but laugh. It was extremely small. Like 3-4 inches. She kept pushing that nothing happened. I didn't believe her, so I did some detective work and found out she actually did. Okay, it was obvious but I wanted to be a 100% sure. I once had a fake ID and I had been using it successfully for a few months. I go to local bar and ask for a drink. Give the guy the ID and he says come on man, I know this guy. I still tried to get the drink by saying OHH hey bro, yeah how have you been man. Didn't work and I got the ID taken away. I did get it back because I ended up meeting a woman who attended the same bar. My cousin dropped out of college and was too embarrassed to tell his parents. Problem was he went to a college only 10 minutes or so from his house. So his dad would drive him to class. For about a year his dad would drop him off. And he'd just go to the bar to shoot pool and have a beer while his parents thought he was in class. I think his parents are still under the impression he graduated. Since we were kids I've known a guy who has told everyone he was a backup dancer for JLo. That Kim K and him were legit friends. And Britney Spears and his video chat every day. He convinced a ton, 10 girls, that he was the opener for some singer named Ashley and he needed backup dancers. Held auditions and everything and then held multiple practices only to of course tell them he was unfairly let go from the show and he was suing them. My son was playing with the phone he wasn't supposed to have. When I came in his room he quickly hid it, but I'm good and can spot contraband from a mile away. We argued over whether or not he had a phone. He threw out a "you're old and have bad eyes" to me being delusional BC of the MI I do in fact have. The fact that he threw in the delusional comment really pissed me off. So when he was sleeping I checked his bed and sure enough found the phone on the charger. I took it and hid it well. He looked for that phone for a couple of days and then started asking me if I took it. I told him that I was really confused because how could I take a phone that he never had? That I believed him that he didn't have one and that I must have been wrong. This went on for 2 months before I told him I did in fact take it and that don't gaslight some unless you want to be gaslighted in return. It drove him crazy. One of my old college roommates was desperately trying to get rid of his long-distance girlfriend. But she would keep holding on and demanding more and more from him the more he tried to push her away. So when he finally saw her over a holiday, he told her he had terminal cancer and only had a few years left to live. And that she should be with someone who could make her happy long term. She believed him. And agreed to break up with him. But she got a hold of my number so she could check on him. My roommate kept having me tell her worse and worse lies about his health. Until about a year later when he finally had me tell her he died. Now whenever he goes back to his hometown he has to make sure that there's no chance of any overlap so she doesn't find out he's not actually dead.